good morning students. In this short video, we are going to learn the structures passing through the various foramina in the various cranial fossae. First, we will learn the structures passing through the anterior cranial fossa, then the middle, and lastly we will come to the structure passing through the various foramina in the norma basalis interna, okay, in the view of the norma basalis externa. Let us come to the structures which pass through the anterior cranial fossa. This is the frontal crest in the midline, and this is the crista galli, the part of the ethmoid bone. It is in the midline structure, and on either side of the crista galli lies the cribriform plate. Now, between the frontal crest and the crista galli, there is a presence of a foramina, and this foramina is called as the foramina cecum. Okay. Now, if this foramina is patent, and this is called foramina cecum because sometimes it is blind, nothing passes through it, but when it is patent, this foramina cecum, then it gives passage to a vein which is draining the nasal mucosa to the superior sagittal sinus. So from nasal mucosa to the superior sagittal sinus. Then on either side of the crista galli, these are the cribriform plate on the right side as well as onto the left side. Now this gives passage, this small foraminas of the cribriform plate gives passage to the olfactory nerve, and these olfactory nerves are bringing the olfaction sensation from the nasal mucosa, and they will end into the olfactory bulb. Olfactory bulb is a part of the first cranial nerve. Okay, olfactory nerve carries the sense of olfaction or the smell. Okay, now the cribriform plate, just above that there lies the olfactory bulb. Okay, olfactory bulb. Now then, let us come to the anterior and posterior ethmoidal canal. By the side of the cribriform plate, the lateral margin of cribriform plate on either side will show the presence of an anterior, and here is the posterior ethmoidal canal. Now this canal begins, if I tell you, this will begin in the orbit. Let me show you the orbit. If you can see the orbit here, and this on the medial wall of the orbit, this is the nose, so this is the medial wall of the orbit, and in the medial wall of the orbit you can see the presence of the canal. This is the anterior ethmoidal canal. You can see a foramina here. This is the beginning of the, and posteriorly there is another canal. Seen, the foramina is seen, which is the beginning of the posterior ethmoidal canal. Let the light come properly, and then you can see both. This is the anterior ethmoidal canal in the medial wall of the orbit, and this is the posterior ethmoidal canal. They are present at the superior border of the ethmoidal plate. Okay. These two canals, they open here by the lateral margin of the cribriform plate, anterior and the posterior ethmoidal canal. And this anterior ethmoidal canal will give passage to the anterior ethmoidal nerve and vessel. Similarly, the posterior ethmoidal canal, through which will come out the posterior ethmoidal nerve and the vessel. Now, these were the structures which were seen passing through the various foraminas and canal of the anterior cranial fossa. Let us now come to the middle cranial fossa. Okay, there are many canals, fissures and foramina present into the middle cranial fossa. Let us come to the first structure, that is the optic canal. See this? This is an optic canal, and this optic canal opens into the apex of the orbit. I am showing you this view from the, and I will try to just put the tip of this pencil into the optic canal. Okay, see here, this is that optic canal. If you can see here, I have put the tip of the pencil into this optic canal. Yes, it is seen now. Okay, if you can zoom a little bit. Okay, this rounded foramina which is seen here is the optic canal opening in the orbit. Okay, and its opening in the middle cranial fossa is here. Okay, so this is that optic canal of the left side, and this is the optic canal of the right side. This optic canal give passage to the optic nerve. Okay, optic nerve which is covered by the meninges, and within the covering of the meninges, that is the dura, pia and arachnoid, there is the presence of an artery also, that is called as the ophthalmic artery. Okay, so two structures they pass through optic canal, optic nerve and ophthalmic artery covered by the dura, arachnoid. Okay, now let us come to a fissure. Okay, a large fissure, and this fissure is called as the superior orbital fissure. Okay, now this superior orbital fissure I am trying to show you here. This is the margin between, or the border between, the anterocranial fossa and the middle, that is formed by the posterior border of the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and this is the anteroclinoid process. And just below this there is a fissure, and that fissure is not better seen from this view. It is called as the superior orbital fissure. Yes, on right side as well as left side, this fissure is the superior orbital fissure. This also connects the middle cranial fossa with that of the orbit. Okay, and if you will try to see this superior orbital fissure, it will be better seen from the orbital side. Okay, and when I will pass my pencil tip here, this will go into the superior orbital fissure. Okay, see this. This is the superior, let it focus. This is that superior orbital fissure which lies just, okay, inferior and lateral to the optic canal opening at the apex. Okay, so what you are seeing is the superior orbital fissure of the right orbit. Okay, right orbit. You can see here it is a slit-like structure which is wider on medial side towards nose and becomes narrow as it goes towards the lateral side. So this is the superior orbital fissure. Okay, we will try to see what structures they pass from this superior orbital fissure, and since you will not be able to see a clear view of the superior because it is hidden deep to that of the free margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid which is overhanging to the superior orbital fissure. Okay, I will just have drawn a diagram to show you the structures, many structures they will pass from middle cranial fossa to the orbit, and from orbit to that of the middle cranial fossa, and this is a superior orbital fissure. Okay, that white color, and I have colored the other bones which forms the boundary. For example, here this green color is given here to the free margin. Okay, this is the lesser wing of the sphenoid which is articulating with that of the frontal bone. See here, this is the free margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and this is lesser wing of the sphenoid which articulates with the orbital plate of the frontal bone. Okay, so that is shown here. Okay, and we are seeing this orbital fissure of the right side, okay, from the orbit side, okay, not from the middle cranial fossa, just to give a proper visualization to this. Okay, this is that at the apex of the orbit is the optic canal is here. This is the greater wing of sphenoid, GWS. This is the lesser wing of sphenoid. This is the orbital plate of the frontal bone. So I will just write frontal orbital plate. This is the body of the sphenoid, and this lesser wing and the greater wing, they are the prolongation from the body of sphenoid. So this is the how the boundary of the lesser wing of the fissure is orbital fissure is formed, which is superior orbital fissure. Above it is bounded by the free margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid, below by the greater wing of the sphenoid, and medially it is the body of the sphenoid which forms its boundary. And in the orbital surface, if you are seeing this fissure, there is a fibrotendinous ring which is attached, which is also covering to the optic nerve and the ophthalmic artery, coming in the orbit through the optic canal. Now this orbital fissure can be divided with the help of this fibrotendinous ring into three parts. This is the medial, intermediate and lateral part of the orbital fissure. Thus the medial and intermediate are dilated, wide structures, while that lateral is quite a narrow fissure. Okay, so let us see what passes through these fissures. Okay, and let us begin with that of the lateral side. There are many structures which are going from the lateral. Most laterally there will be the passage of the, let me just draw it. Okay, it is the passage of a vein, and this is the superior ophthalmic vein. So this is superior, just you can note down here the superior ophthalmic vein. From the orbit it is going towards the middle cranial fossa. Okay, this is in the middle cranium. Then will come a nerve called as the lacrimal nerve. So this nerve, okay, I am drawing it into the yellow if you are able to see it. This is the lacrimal nerve. Okay, and lacrimal nerve is a branch from the ophthalmic nerve. Then the second branch from the ophthalmic is the frontal nerve. So I will draw here the frontal nerve. So this is the second branch of the ophthalmic, lacrimal. Next is frontal nerve. And then there will be the third branch, which is not in the lateral part of this fissure. It is going into the intermediate part, and this is the nasociliary nerve. That is the nasomedially. Okay, it is nasociliary. Thus the three branches of the ophthalmic nerve which lies in the orbit, they come, which lie in the middle cranial fossa to begin with, they come to the through this fissure. It come into through the fissure into the orbit, and they are most laterally lacrimal nerve, frontal nerve, and most medially it is the nasociliary nerve is present here. Now in between the frontal and the lacrimal nerve there is a presence of an artery in the lateral part of this fissure, and this is called as recurrent meningeal branch of ophthalmic artery. That means ophthalmic artery is here. You see this into this orbital foramina, okay, at the apex, and this gives a branch which goes back. Okay, sorry, I have drawn a little more wider than the ophthalmic artery. It is very narrow. Okay, so this is the recurrent, means which will coming after coming to the orbit, it will go back to the middle cranial fossa. So it is recurrent branch of the ophthalmic artery, which is here. Ophthalmic artery is located here in the optic canal, which is at the apex of the orbit. Okay, apex of the orbit. There is a cranial nerve which is present also in the lateral part, and this is the fourth cranial nerve. That is, fourth cranial nerve means it is the trochlear nerve. This is trochlear nerve. So this is a cranial nerve. So we have seen the branches of the ophthalmic nerve. We have seen the fourth cranial nerve here. Okay, fourth cranial nerve. Right. Then from the intermediate part of this fissure, there are two divisions of the third cranial nerve, that is the oculomotor nerve is seen. Two divisions of the oculomotor are the third cranial. So I will just write it here. This is the third cranial nerve, that is oculomotor. This is the oculomotor nerve is located here. Okay, in the intermediate part, oculo. And then there is the sixth cranial nerve, that is the abducent cranial nerve, that is the sixth. It is also present here. Okay, that is the sixth cranial nerve, and it is the abducent nerve which is also present into the intermediate part, and most medial part gives passage to a vein, and that is the inferior ophthalmic. Remember that superior was here in the lateral most part, and so the medial most part is also gives origin to one or two tributaries of the inferior ophthalmic vein. So this is the inferior ophthalmic vein. So, two veins, superior and inferior ophthalmic vein, three cranial nerves, that is the third, fourth, and the sixth cranial nerve for extraocular muscle, and then the branches from the fifth cranial nerve, that is the ophthalmic division, frontal, lacrimal, and nasociliary. And then from the optic canal, this is, we have already seen, it is giving passage to the optic nerve and the ophthalmic artery. Okay, ophthalmic artery and optic nerve, they are there. So these are the structures which passes through the superior orbital fissure. Let us go to the other foraminas which are present into the middle cranial fossa. Okay, we will see that from the middle cranial fossa, the structure which through a foramina which is just present, okay, lateral, posterior to that of the superior orbital fissure. Okay, on this side, this is that foramina. This is called as the foramina rotundum. It is called as foramina rotundum. And when I was teaching you the description of the middle cranial fossa, I must have told you that this gives passage to the maxillary nerve. It gives passage to the part of the second part of the trigeminal fifth cranial nerve, which will go to the pterygopalatine fossa. Okay, it will, from here it will go to the pterygo. So this is the foramina rotundum. It is not exactly a foramina, but it is a canal like, because it has some length. Anyway, it is called as foramina. Then comes posterolateral to this foramina rotundum. You can see here a oval foramina. See this foramina? It is oval foramina. On this side, this is that little broken. No, it is a little longer here. This is foramina ovale. And this foramina ovale gives passage to the third part of the trigeminal nerve, that is the mandibular nerve. Okay, it gives passage to the mandibular nerve, to the accessory meningeal artery which comes in, and emissary vein, and the lesser petrosal nerve. Lesser petrosal nerve will go to form the relay in the otic ganglion. Okay, otic ganglion. So that lesser petrosal nerve and the mandibular nerve, emissary vein, okay, they are going through this foramina ovale. Okay, mandibular nerve is the main structure which passes down in the infratemporal fossa through here. Okay, then posterolateral to the foramina ovale, there is a very minute foramina here, if you can see. Yes, I am trying to show you here this small foramina, and it is located just posterolateral. Okay, it is better seen on this side. You see this foramina spinosum. It is called as foramina spinosum, through which comes inside the middle cranial fossa is the middle meningeal artery. And this middle meningeal artery then will have a branch, and the impression I have shown you. Okay, these are the anterior and posterior division of middle meningeal artery, which will cause the grooves here, okay, onto the lateral wall of the middle cranial fossa. So this is the middle meningeal artery passing through the foramina spinosum. There will be other structure beside middle meningeal artery, will be the emissary vein. It will be the emissary vein and meningeal branch of the mandibular nerve. Meningeal branch of the mandibular nerve will come back from the mandibular nerve, okay, from infratemporal fossa through these. Okay. Now let us come to, after foramina spinosum, we come to the foramina lacerum. Okay, and this foramina lacerum is not very well seen here. This is that the foramina lacerum is here, and this has a irregular margin. Okay, it has an irregular margin, the foramina lacerum. That's why it is called lacerum, because it has a lacerated margin. And this gives passage to the ascending pharyngeal artery and emissary vein. Okay, it is a large foramina, but it is blocked by the fibrofatty tissue through which only two structures passes through and through, and they are ascending pharyngeal artery, branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery, and an emissary vein. I hope you know by this time what is an emissary vein. These are the veins which connect the intracranial venous structure with the extracranial venous structure outside the cranial cavity. Okay. Now then, on to the anterior surface of the petrous temporal bone, there are the two hiatuses are located, and from this hiatus there goes a groove, and this groove, one of the lateral groove is coming from the lesser hiatus. Okay, and this hiatus for the lesser petrosal nerve, and through this hiatus will come a very minute or very thin nerve which will pass into the foramina ovale, and will, just I said that it will relay into the otic ganglion, the parasympathetic fibers. Then from the greater hiatus for the greater petrosal nerve, the greater petrosal nerve will go towards the foramina lacerum. Okay, and then this nerve will unite with the sympathetic division and will form the nerve of the pterygoid canal, which will extend from the anterior margin of the foramina lacerum to that of the pterygopalatine fossa, where it will relay in the sphenopalatine ganglion into the spheno. So there are two hiatuses and two groove. The lateral hiatus will with the groove will go towards the foramina ovale, and then the greater petrosal nerve will be carried through the medial hiatus and groove to the foramina lacerum. These are the I'm sorry that I am not able to show you because they are not good. Okay, they are not good here onto the anterior surface of the petrous part of the temporal bone. Let us come to the posterior cranial fossa. What are the structures which passes through the foraminas, the fissures, okay, and canals which are present in the posterior cranial fossa? Let us come to the internal acoustic meatus. See, this big foramina is the internal acoustic meatus, which is located on the posterior surface of the petrous temporal bone. Okay, onto the posterior surface. Yes, in this way it is seen better. This is the petrous temporal bone. I mean, say, this is the internal acoustic meatus on posterior surface of the petrous temporal bone. And this foramina gives passage to the facial nerve, that is the seventh cranial nerve, and the vestibulocochlear, that is the eighth cranial nerve, and also passes along with these two cranial nerve labyrinthine vessels. Labyrinthine artery is a branch from the pontine artery, okay, which is lying here onto the clivus. Okay, it is the pontine artery is just posterior to the clivus, from where a branch goes into this internal acoustic meatus. After this, just below and lateral to this is an irregular foramina, quite wide, which I am not able to show you very clearly, is the jugular foramina. Okay, in this side it is better, okay, wider. See this foramina where my tip of the pencil is going here. This foramina, is a large foramina, and this is called as the jugular foramina. This is called as jugular. And this jugular foramina can be divided into three parts. Okay, three parts means you can divide it. Let me draw it. Okay, suppose we are dealing with the right jugular foramina. So this somewhere here you can just draw a rough diagram of the right jugular foramina. Okay, it can divide it into anterior part, the middle part, and the posterior. Anterior, middle, and the posterior part. Through the anterior part will pass the inferior petrosal sinus. So this inferior petrosal sinus will pass through the anterior part of the jugular foramina. Through the middle part will pass three cranial nerves which are coming from below. These are the 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve. Glossopharyngeal, vagus and its accessory nerve or accessory nerve. 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve, they will pass through the middle part of the jugular foramina. And the posterior part of the jugular foramina through which will drain the sinus, that is the sigmoid sinus will come here. The groove for that you can see here in this. This is the groove for the sigmoid sinus, which is continuous with the right transverse sinus on this side, and this groove of the sigmoid sinus will open into this wide area here, okay, and this will be the how the sigmoid sinus will pass through the posterior most part of the jugular foramina, from the jugular foramina, and below the base of the skull, okay, this will form the internal jugular vein, so it is the internal jugular vein is the continuation of the sigmoid sinus. Then let us come to the foramina magnum, the largest foramina of the body, okay, and this is oval in shape, and we will divide it into two parts, an anterior part and posterior part. From the anterior part, most of the ligaments will go, and this is the apical ligament of dance coming from the second dance of the second cervical vertebra, that tooth-like projection, an apical ligament will come which will attach to the clivus. Then superior band of the cruciate ligament will come. Cruciate ligament is a cross-shaped ligament, and its superior band will come through foramina magnum to attach onto the clivus, okay, and this is, and the third ligament will come covering to all these will be the membrana tectoria. So first will be apical ligament of dance, then superior band of the cruciate ligament, and third will be the membrana tectoria. They will come and gets attached onto the clivus, okay, and you know what is clivus, okay. Now the posterior part of the foramina magnum will give passage to many structure. The most important structure which will pass through the foramina magnum down is the medulla oblongata, or simply the medulla, okay. It is not the spinal cord which passes through foramina magnum, it is the lowest most part of the medulla which passes through the foramina magnum, and this medulla is covered by the three meninges, okay. Dura, arachnoid, and pia is intimately attached to the medulla, okay. Then along with this, spinal root of accessory nerve will also ascend up, which is coming from the cervical part of the spinal cord on either side, right and left side, because they are present on lateral aspect, okay. And then the vertebral arteries, right and left vertebral arteries will also lie in subarachnoid space, and they will come up into the cranial cavity through this foramina magnum. Anterior and posterior spinal arteries, this will arise from that of the basilar artery, this from the vertebral artery will unite to form the branches, will unite to form that of the anterior, and posterior spinal arteries will arise, which will go down from here. It will go down through foramina magnum on the surface of the spinal cord. That's why they are called as anterior and posterior. There is one anterior in the median fissure anterior, and there are two posterior spinal artery in the posterolateral sulcus of the spinal cord, which will go down. Tonsils of cerebellum, it is the most posterior most and in lowest part of the cerebellar hemisphere, which are called as tonsil, and sometime a small part of this tonsil they may project into the foramina magnum, okay, foramina, and sometime it may, the projection or the prolongation through the foramina magnum may be excessive, okay, and this may cause the problem. Otherwise, a small part of the cerebellar hemisphere, that is the lowest part called as tonsil, may project through the foramina magnum. So this was the foramina magnum. I will suggest you to draw a diagram and just see the structures which are related to, which are passing through the foramina magnum. Then we come to the canal here, which is called as hypoglossal canal. I will try to show you. This is on the right side. See this opening of this canal you are seeing here, just onto the lateral margin and above of the foramina magnum here, this canal on right and left side, this is called as the hypoglossal canal, inner opening of the hypoglossal canal. And if you will see this hypoglossal canal, where it will come out just onto the front and lateral aspect of the occipital condyle. Here it will come out on either side. Okay, so this is that opening of the hypoglossal canal, and this will give passage to the hypoglossal nerve, which is the 12th cranial nerve. It will give also passage to the emissary vein and the meningeal branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery. Meningeal branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery we have learned, okay, before also. And this is the meningeal branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery, which will come into the posterior cranial fossa. Then sometime there is the presence of the posterior condylar canal, okay, opening. And this is posterior to the condyle. It's not here, but probably this is the posterior condylar canal here, okay. And this posterior condylar canal, it opens into the posterior cranial fossa. And if I show you the outer opening of this posterior, this is lying just posterior to the occipital condyle. These are, and you can see here this opening, and this don't confuse it with the hypoglossal opening. Okay, hypoglossal canal is on anterolateral aspect of the occipital condyle opening here, and this is posteriorly. So this is the opening of the posterior condylar canal, which opens here or by the side of the foramina magnum, and this gives passage to that of the emissary vein. It gives passage. So this completes the structures which are passing through the various cranial fossae, anterior, middle and posterior, through the foramina, through the fissures, okay, through the canals of which are seen here. Okay, and I will just take one more minute to tell you that the crista galli and the frontal crest, they give attachment to the anterior end of the falx cerebri, which is the median fold of the dura mater, which comes right up to the internal occipital protuberance, okay, bringing on its margin the superior sagittal sinus, while this superior border of the petrous temporal bone, anterior clinoid process and posterior clinoid process, the margin of the transverse sulci, they all give attachment to a horizontal fold of the dura mater, what is called as tentorium cerebelli. Okay, tentorium. So these are two important, falx cerebri and tentorium cerebelli, which are attached to this cranial fossae. Okay, cranial fossae, and they protect the and hold the brain into the position. Okay, so we have seen that all the 12 cranial nerves, they passes through the base of the skull here. Okay, the first was olfactory, second was optic, third was oculomotor, trochlear and abducent. They were passing through the orbital fissure, superior orbital fissure, which was also giving passage to that of the first division of trigeminal, that is ophthalmic. Rotundum was giving passage to maxillary. The mandibular was passing through that of the, foramina ovale. Okay, it was mandibular. So this completes up to the 6th nerve. 7 and 8th were passing through the internal acoustic meatus. Okay, and 9th, 10th and 11th, they were passing from the intermediate part of the jugular foramina, and 12th or hypoglossal was passing through the hypoglossal canal. Okay, so this completes the various structures which passes through the various foramina at the base of the skull. Norma basalis interna. Thank you very much for watching this video. It become a little longer, but it will give you a lot of information. Thanks.